There's been a lot of talk this week about who could potentially knock the Knicks off in the first round. Do we think anyone can knock them off in the first round? We're going to tier list their potential opponents right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And he's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and the co-host of the Saturday Locked On NBA podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by Prizepicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. I also wanted to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks a part of your day today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. On today's show, there's been a lot of talk this week on ESPN and elsewhere about the Pistons suddenly being this trendy new team that could knock the Knicks out of the playoffs in the first round. And everybody seems to think that it's a hot take to say it. And everyone's been making that hot take. So we're getting to the bottom of it. Where do the Pistons rank in relation to all the other teams that could potentially end up the 6th seed to face the Knicks? We're going to do a good old-fashioned S to F tier list to decide the fates of all these teams that could potentially face the Knicks. But if that's not enough for you guys and you need more of Locked On Knicks in your life, your favorite podcast now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Knicks Daily Newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. All right, Gavin, let's get right into it. So we've seen the scuttlebutt around social media, on the airwaves from ESPN and elsewhere, people being like, the Pistons are gonna knock off the Knicks, this scrappy Pistons team. They're ready to be a giant killer. They're ready to take the Knicks out of the playoffs. The Knicks are going to be a one and done. Blah 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 blah. I don't know if I buy any of it, but we're going to go down the standings from 4 to 10 and give S to F tier rankings. So for people that aren't familiar with what an S tier ranking is, you go from S tier is the highest, then A, B, C, D, and F. You skip E because it's like a grading scale, except for there's an S at the top. S is like, for the purpose of this exercise, consider them like Boston. S would be like favored to beat the Knicks in a series, so probably not going to see any S's unless there's a crazy take from one of us on here. But all the way down to F, which is sweep, possible gentleman's sweep. Whatever, but easy pickings for the Knicks in the first round. So, Gavin, I'll leave it to you on what team you want to start with. Maybe we start with the Pistons, who are the team currently slotted to face the Knicks in the first round. Maybe we go Bucks, who are the top team record wise right now, and possibly going to face the Knicks. They only have a game of separation from the Pistons. There's the Pacers, there's the Hawks, there's all kinds of teams here. So I'll leave it to you. Which one you want to tackle first?
I'll go with the Bucks because but I'll talk about Detroit in the same context because I actually think the Bucks are the biggest threat to the Knicks in the first round, and I'll make them a B tier team if we're saying I think in my mind A is kind of like a 50-50 matchup, B is maybe 55-45, 60-40. The point is I would have the Knicks as a slight favorite, so I'm going to pick the Milwaukee Bucks, and that's because, call me old-fashioned, I think playoff experience matters. Like let's go back to just the 2024 bracket a year ago. Like, how many teams advanced that hadn't been in the playoffs before, hadn't been in a competitive series? Like Oklahoma City's the obvious one. They got out of the first round. They swept the Pelicans. Other teams that moved forward, the Mavericks, they'd been in the Western Conference Finals 2 years before that, perennial playoff team. The Timberwolves, they had not been out of the first round, but they had consistently been in the playoffs. The Nuggets, obviously, just won the championship the year before. The Knicks had been out of the first round each of the last the year before, going into last year. The Pacers were a new team that upset the Bucks, but they were aided by a lot of Milwaukee injuries. So I'm going to, and then a lot of New York injuries. So I'll give it to them. I'll throw a slight caveat on that. Cleveland beat Orlando, who was a newcomer. Boston obviously was not a newcomer. So I say all that to say, barring unforeseen circumstances or like a truly dominant regular season team like Oklahoma City, and even Oklahoma City, Alex, underachieved their seed. My premise on like selling Detroit here is that even though they're fantastic, they have the 4th best net rating in basketball since the All-Star break. I just think the playoffs will expose some things. And we saw that with the Knicks the first time they made their run. We see it constantly when teams hit a round where they've never been. There are just elements of playoff basketball they're not quite ready for. That's not to say that a lot of their team can't translate. Like I think their shooting will play. I think Cade Cunningham is like a bona fide, like 16 game number 1 type player. I love the guy. I think he's going to be a perennial borderline MVP candidate going forward. He is fantastic. But even in that Oklahoma City game, you saw him struggle a little bit. And I'm absolutely cherry picking by referencing that one. But I just don't quite know if this team, like they don't have one guy who has like a real playoff track record. Like if you want to sell me on what Tobias Harris did on the Sixers, well, good for you. I'm not buying it. So anyways, I say all that. I said I was going to talk about Milwaukee. I only ended up talking about Detroit. I would just say Milwaukee relative to that, obviously, has Damian Lillard, has Giannis, who's been the best player on a title team and is at least as good now, has Kyle Kuzma, who once upon a time was like the 3rd or 4th best guy on a championship team and nominally still in his prime. Even if the Knicks on paper, I think clearly match up with Milwaukee better than Detroit, I just find it hard to just throw out there that Detroit's going to be the same team they were in the regular season. But what do you think about that?
I'm actually going to go a tier lower for Milwaukee. I'm going to go C tier. I am not terribly bothered by them, if I'm being honest. And maybe it's disrespect. I mean, to your point, they have Damian Lillard, who has been a playoff performer in his career. They have Giannis, who's literally won a championship. A lot of their core that's there right now has won a championship, although it's a little fractured from that team that won the title in 2021, obviously, because things roll over quickly in the NBA. But I think the thing to me is that they match up so well with them. Like having Karl Anthony Towns, if he can continue, the trajectory that he's on now, where he's sort of in lieu of the Jalen Brunson injury, sort of found himself more again, is becoming more involved in the offense. If he becomes a guy that teams have to start watching for again as like a 30-40 point threat, and especially, doing a lot of that damage from the 3-point line, that means that one of the greatest strengths for Milwaukee over the years has been that they can have Brook Lopez defending the rim and Giannis Antetokounmpo on help defense, to get those, help blocks or, just the big defensive plays and rebounds that they need at those biggest moments. And if you have Cat out there, he's either doing one of two things. He's either going to draw Brook Lopez away from the, defending the inside, or he's going to draw Giannis out from there and take away the ability to make those big plays. Either way, it's a win because you're creating a situation where they're not playing defense the way that they want to. You also still obviously have a Jalen Brunson. You still have a Mikal Bridges who's stepping his game up recently. I mean, for as much as maybe I went against the pale a little bit, I think I said this take on here at one point. Like I was like kind of pretty okay with their trade for Kyle Kuzma. If anything, I thought it was going to be a good one, and he has not been shooting fantastic since he got there. Like he's just looking okay, but definitely not a defensive stalwart. You're going to have him on either OG or Mikal, who are both playing fantastic lately. And that brings up, the fact that the Knicks have Mikal and OG also, which means that they can put Mikal on Dame Lillard, or they can put Deuce McBride on Dame Lillard, who's been playing fantastic defense lately and is probably a better individual matchup. You have OG that you could put on Giannis, and he's done a pretty stand-up job of dealing with Giannis in recent memory. And then you still have like a Mitchell Robinson if you need him for extra interior defense. You have Cat if you need him for that offensive explosion. I just think the Knicks are built to take down a team like Milwaukee that is a little short on depth and high on star power, but unfortunately for them, a little bit exploitable on the defensive end as far as taking away what they want to get to with their star players. Now, that's not to say that like Giannis couldn't go for 50 or Dame couldn't go for 50 or, whatever. Like they're still two of the best players on the planet, but I think that they are to me at least, a little less deep and therefore a little easier to game plan for in the playoffs, which I think we've seen the last few years with how the results have generally gone for them.
Yeah, I'll push back on a couple of things. My understanding, and I'm not watching every Bucks game, but my understanding is they're pretty happy with what Kyle Kuzma's done so far. I'm not sure if this is still true, but I know through like his first like 8 games on the team or so, he had like 100th percentile defensive rebounding rate. And I think that was part of both of our premises of why we like the trade is like, I just thought it made them like a more physical team. And it got back to like where they've been great the last few years is they just overwhelmed you with size. And like, obviously they don't have Drew Holiday as the head of the snake anymore. And Damian Lillard is like an ad infinitum. I'm not sure if it's the right uses of that term, but defensive downgrade from Drew Holiday. And yet they are bigger. They are more physical. They can own games on the glass. And as they've been quite good post All-Star break, that's sort of been the model. And simultaneously with the other two guys, they got Kevin Porter Jr. He's been playing really well, averaging 11 points per game for them. I know shooting not as well the last couple of games. Jericho Sims is now injured and out for a month, so he should be coming back like just in time for the playoffs. He's been a real revelation for them. Really good defender, like great playing in the second unit, setting screens for Dame, like we saw for him. I know you're shaking your head at this, but like we saw with him and Jalen Brunson at times earlier this year. It would be so if I don't know how we're going to do a podcast after Jericho drops like a 20 and 10 on the Knicks in the playoffs and beats us. But anywho, I do think they have some of that defensive personnel and have gotten back to that identity a little bit because they were willing to make a bold move and move on from Chris Middleton. They're a little deeper. Obviously, someone like AJ Green has emerged for them and become a really like standout movement shooter. Taurean Prince has had a nice season. Gary Trent has picked it up a little bit. The key to that matchup to me is if the Knicks stick with their normal starting lineup, you know what Milwaukee's going to do, right? They're going to put Brook Lopez on Josh Hart, and in doing so, and just put Giannis on Cat, and try to park Brook Lopez at the rim. The way the Knicks got around that last time is they used Hart in the action with Jalen Brunson a lot, and Brook was in drop defense, and Brunson just started raining 3 after 3 after 3. And as long as Tom Thibodeau leans into that, I don't really know how Milwaukee solves that. Or to your point, if the Knicks are even a little bit smarter, they start Deuce McBride for Josh Hart, and then you have nowhere to hide Brook Lopez. And you also have to figure out, like, the other really challenging thing for them is, like, where do you put Damian Lillard? And we were thinking of potentially doing an episode today on like the benefits of Brunson being out. If you have a Mikal Bridges who's shooting like 65, 47, 90 since the Brunson injury, like if he is rolling going to playoffs and he's confident and he's feeling himself, and Tibbs for once actually leans into, hey, they got one of the worst defenders on a guy who can score an efficient 20 points per game. Let's just give him the basketball. I don't really know how Milwaukee guards him. So there are just some real substantial matchup issues that I think have improved a little bit with Kuzma, but to your point, I don't know how Milwaukee solves them. So I'm totally cool with the idea that Detroit is scarier. Just going into a series and knowing the other team is the best player on the floor is always a little scary. And I think Milwaukee, as great as Brunson is, can fairly say that with Giannis still.
Yeah, I guess we'll see if that ends up being the Knicks matchup. But for now, all we can do is speculate. And there's more speculation to be done, more tier listing to be done. We're only one team deep, so we got to rank the rest of these 6, 7, however many teams that we got to get through. Lots more to get through next on Locked On Knicks. But first, we want to let you know about our friends over at Prizepicks. And basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prizepicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prizepicks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. That's 1,000 times. It's easy to use, available for over 30 states, and lets you mix and match projections across different sports. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite things, building lineups and doing it across multiple sports. Baseball season starting back up. So, on those beautiful nights when you get a Mets game and a Knicks game over the next couple months, of course, you only get that for realsies once the baseball regular season starts in a few weeks. But there's that nice little overlap. You can maybe pick a Lindor home run and a Jalen Brunson 30 piece in one night and get rewarded for it. Like, what more could you ask for? So if you want to do that, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game.
We also want to tell you about our good friends over at Hungryroot when it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning. I had this ongoing problem. I just don't have the time between work, life, and trying to eat healthier. I was constantly feeling stressed out. I'd go to the grocery store, buy things I don't need, and then end up with no time to actually cook. And sticking to my health goals, that was a struggle too. But everything changed when I discovered Hungryroot. Honestly, it's a game changer. It's the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungryroot, it's like having a personal shopper and nutritionist all in one. They take care of my grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based on my tastes and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options. And the best part, every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. I'm talking quick, healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered straight to my door. It's been a huge time saver and has made healthy eating so much simpler. So you're going to love Hungryroot as much as I do. For a limited time, you can get 40% off your box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA. That's hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. All right, we are back on Locked On Knicks. Alex, I gave my anti-Detroit screed talking through the Bucks. I do genuinely see the case for Detroit being ahead, because I think Milwaukee has some very clear weak points for the Knicks to poke at, and Detroit, like, I think the inexperience is the big glaring one for me. But in terms of how they actually match up on the court, like, there's just not that much to poke at for a team that's been very bad for a long time. Like, they did an incredible job turning over the roster this year.
Yeah, I think the main thing too is how they've played the Knicks so far this year. I mean, they've played them tough. There's still one more matchup coming on April 10th, but in almost the last game of the season, which is crazy. So maybe some big implications there, or certainly big things for pundits to look at. But they've taken 2 out of 3 from the Knicks already this year so far. They're playing at a way different level. I mean, it reminds me a lot of just other teams that have turned the corner recently. Now, granted, that isn't necessarily a huge ring endorsement. Like the Magic last year, for example, kind of turned the corner, and everybody was going, "Oh man, look at how big of a threat they could be." And obviously, I mean, they did push Cleveland in the first round, so I mean that's something. And Cleveland has turned around and had the season that they're having this year now, so maybe that was even more impressive than we realized. But um, it's a lot of times you get that first year team that breaks through into the playoffs, and it's a little bit of a struggle. And so I feel you in that regard, where they're going to have to learn, like, playoff basketball is different. The calls are going to be different. The intensity level is going to be different. Like, an intense regular season game is still like the least intense playoff game a lot of the times, and they're going to have to learn how to play through that. But I do think that Cade Cunningham is one of those guys that can match up really well against the Knicks. I think that he's sort of a tough guy for them to find the right defender for. I think that if you go Jalen Brunson, he's going to have a field day because he's bigger and stronger, and just Brunson is just okay as a defender. But like Mikal Bridges, I think with how well that Cade gets over screens and then how strong he is, like, it could be tough for Mikal. I think we've seen already, like, they've tried to put Mikal on him, and it's been a little bit of a tough matchup. Deuce McBride maybe a little too small to guard him credibly for like a large stretch of a game. OG maybe would be your best bet, but then you're losing whatever interior defense you can get from him to have him out on the perimeter. We've also seen that, like, against guards with really quick first steps, which Cade might not be like Tyrese Maxey, but he's certainly a quick guy, and plays with, just, I think you've described it this way before, plays with like a really deceptive style where it doesn't look like he's moving that fast, but it just gets to his spots regardless, like no matter who's defending him. Maybe that proves to be a tough matchup for OG. Either way, I'm going to give them one tier higher. I will give the national media credit for saying that they're maybe one of the biggest threats to the Knicks right now, and I hope that they just kind of continued a little bit of a rise they've been on lately, and eventually unseat either the Pacers or the Bucks or both, and end up in that 4-5 matchup. Something about them is just a little, it frightens me a little bit. I think it's just the way that the matchups work out and the way that they've managed to gut out some tough wins against the Knicks so far this year. But I'm going to give them a B tier.
Yeah, I put him in a B tier too. As far as the actual matchup, I think that'll be a series for the Knicks to potentially lean into the Karl Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson lineup and have them on the floor for we haven't seen them play close to this together, but maybe like, I don't know, 15, 16 minutes a game at the same time. Because I think what is going to hurt the Knicks is if Towns is sitting back in drop defense on Cade. And I wonder if they lean a little bit more into Cat switching on Cade. That really worries me with Cade because, like, to the same extent as Jason Tatum, like, he is just so crafty and like really good at getting to the free throw line. I'm wondering like if they could get Cat in foul trouble and that could kind of backfire. But that is how I would approach it when Cat's at center. But I think you're gonna have a lot more luck whether it's Mitch or Mikal. Whether it's OG or Mikal who gets the actual assignment on him. If you have Mitchell Robinson and drop, I actually think you can contain Cade Cunningham fairly well. And you're about as equipped, again, with that group out there as any team in the NBA to contain Cade Cunningham. And if you even like just force Cade to be slightly less efficient and don't let him like just rack up 15 assists a game, I think you're really cutting the head off Detroit because they got Dennis Schroeder and he can do a little bit of this, but they just don't have a lot of shot creation outside of Cade, especially when like Asar Thompson, if he's playing 20 minutes a game, you can just treat him like a non-shooter, right? And he's going to give Jalen Brunson some trouble on the other end of the floor, but you get to play off him. You could even put OG on Asar and have OG as just the resident helper, which if I remember correctly, the Knicks did a little bit in that second matchup. Other most important thing is you identify that Malik Beasley is an S tier shooter, right? Like he is having quite literally, unless he's fallen off the last few games, one of the 5 best shooting seasons like in NBA history. I think it's him and Steph are the only players ever to take, it's something like 12 threes per 40 minutes and hit over 40% of them. And Steph's only done it 3 times. He's about to do it this year. So the Knicks have to respect him. We've seen a bunch of times where they've helped off him and they've had kind of the wrong scheme on him. And just let your guys switch on to Cade Cunningham if you're not going to go with Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I think there is a chance that with the fully unlocked defensive lineup, they could, just produce enough defense at the key moments to then take advantage of what they can get on offense with their best offensive lineup out there, which is going to be an interesting dance to see Tibbs do because he certainly doesn't always succeed at that in the regular season. So we'll see how that translates in the postseason. The Pacers, foe from last year, obviously knocked the Knicks out of the playoffs, though a very depleted version of the Knicks, where it pretty much took Jalen Brunson breaking his hand in Game 7 for that one to finally go away. And I still remember there being like a moment where I thought that maybe they were going to make the comeback without him. And I was like, I don't even know if I wish this on them because then they just have to go out there with nobody left and go face Boston. It wouldn't have been fun. Either way, I'm giving the Pacers, I'm going to go C tier for them as well, which, if we're calling that like 60-40, I might even go lower, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe it's just hubris. Maybe it's just hatred of the Pacers, but I'm just not really buying them as a legitimate threat if both teams are healthy. I think that the Knicks match up well with them. I think they've shown consistently, other than a couple of times like during last year's playoffs, they can usually do a pretty good job of getting Halliburton pretty well out of a game and out of sorts if they just put one of their better defenders on him. And you take him out, and then you've done a lot to neuter that offense. Obviously, Siakam can still go crazy. Miles Turner has shown a penchant for hitting 7 or 8 3-pointers in a game against the Knicks, multiple times in his career and is shooting better than he has for pretty much his whole career this year. So maybe he lights you up a little bit or something, or is drawing Cat out to the perimeter and, creating a mess that way that lets Siakam go crazy, something like that. But either way, they just don't scare me very much. And again, maybe it's hubris, but I just feel like the Knicks at their healthiest and at their best, it's not much of a competition between those two teams to me.
Yeah, I'm really torn between B and C because Indiana, I'm sure you saw the crazy football play they had recently for the Halliburton 3, and then the other night Obi Toppin on him and he hits the game winning 3 on a night where him and Quentin Grimes score a combined 79 points. So shout out to our guys, both hooping in their respective cities. Unfortunately, both in the Eastern Conference, but oh boy, I'm gonna go. I think I'm going to go B at the end of the day. I think I just have more respect for the Pacers than you. Pascal Siakam, like not so much Halliburton. Siakam scares the crap out of me. Like just his shot making last year was ridiculous. I'm with you that if the Knicks are healthy, like they should win that series. But Indiana showed me something, being kind of shockingly competitive with Boston in the next round. Maybe Boston just took them lightly, but despite the fact that Halliburton was hurt for a decent chunk of that series, like they just have tough guys. They have confident guys. I don't think they're going to be scared against the Knicks. On paper, I feel like the Knicks have an advantage at basically every position outside of power forward. I do think they'll have more luck guarding Towns. Like last time they played, the way they were guarding him was very weird. Like they weren't doubling him. They weren't doubling off Josh Hart. I'm assuming that's an adjustment Rick Carlisle will make in the playoffs on him. The Knicks should beat them, but man, it just lodged in my head, like watching Pascal Siakam hit mid-range jumper after mid-range jumper, Andrew Nembhard hit mid-range jumper after mid-range jumper, TJ McConnell just being annoying little TJ McConnell and inspiring some of the, I sound like Trump when I say that, inspiring some of the craziest comments from Josh Hart I've ever heard about another human being. But I don't know, they annoy me, and I think that means I respect them. So I'm putting them B tier. But who are the teams we disrespect, Alex? We're going to talk about that in just a sec, coming up next here on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we got to let you know about Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
All right, and we're back in to keep talking through this tier list of the potential Knicks first round opponents. So, Gavin, I think it's pretty safe to say we're not going to have any S's or A's on this list now that we've made it through. So, no teams we think would be favored, no teams we think would be a 50-50 shot against the Knicks. So, we're now into the territory of probably C's, D's, and F's. I'll throw it to you first. Out of the remaining teams, are there any that you would consider a C team, which is if by our criteria is probably 60-40, something like that? Is there anyone that scares you that much out of those 7 to 10 seats?
Oh, that's a good question. If you want to make it 65-35, that almost swings. So let's talk this through, okay? Orlando would be the team for me, and they have just been such a disaster. A S show is the term I could say, and not an S like the tier list. S like what comes out your butt sometimes. Something else. I guess I was too specific. I gave it away. Anyways, they beat Cleveland. They ended Cleveland's 16-game winning streak, so that's cool. They don't have Jalen Suggs to like potentially injure Jalen Brunson in the first game. If Orlando wants to do that, someone else is going to have to go about it. So you know what? I'm going to disrespect the Orlando Magic, and I'm going to put them D. I just don't think they've done enough. They've had like a really disastrous year from an injury perspective. They've had a disastrous last couple of drafts where they clearly like you hit a home run with Franz Wagner or pretty close to a home run. Paolo, I know some of the discourse, but let's call that, maybe they should have taken Chet. I'm still going to call that a triple for them. Just you have what every team in the NBA wants, right? Which are 2 monster, ginormous two-way wings. Just add all the shooting you can. They decided not to do that. I think it was actually smart they didn't do it at the deadline because they realized that this team just wasn't going to win big. But I say all that to say, like, they are a weird group. Like, the Knicks could get into like some just like sloppy, like 88, 87 games with them. But the Knicks have mostly kicked their butt this year. They mostly played them really well. And I know Orlando's been beaten up in those games, but I just can't get out of my head that the Knicks are a pretty good matchup for them. The only thing that scares me is I'm a big believer in Franz Wagner after the way he started this year. He hasn't been playing quite as well since coming back from injury, but he's scary. And Paolo, like, what did he finish the Cleveland series with, like a 40-point game or something? Like, he's scary in the right setting. So I think D is appropriate. I think I would put it something like 70-30, 75-25 in favor of the Knicks. There's a world where it's challenging, but I think it would just take Orlando's role players, like pretty much all playing out of their minds, and the Knicks really underperforming for them to lose that series.
Yeah, I'm gonna go D for Orlando as well. I just think, it would take a huge lapse from the Knicks. I mean, they've also got an uphill bat. If we're even considering like the odds of them being able to get up to the 6th seed, like at this point in the season, they're 6 games back of the Pistons. So I feel like we were talking about it like before when we were still figuring out what to even do for an episode today, and we were kind of just like, yeah, the Knicks are pretty well locked into the 3 seed. Like we feel pretty confident about that at this point. They're definitely like most likely too good to fall below that. And so it's pretty much just waiting to see who falls into number 6. So in that all by itself, that's almost enough to make me say like, hey, they really don't scare me because there's probably very little chance they even make it there. But if they go on a heater to end the season, that would scare me enough to make me say, this isn't an F tier team anymore. This is now like a D tier team, because to even get to that spot, they would have to go on a heck of a run to end the season. To overtake that 6th spot and get into that 3 or the 3-6 matchup against the Knicks. So yeah, I think that's what scares me the most, is that they were a team with pedigree that just thanks to injury and then just overall not great play for part of the year, even when injured reasons, they just they've kind of not been very good this year. The Hawks are the next team I think that deserves any real conversation before we move on to the 2 cellar dwellers, including the team that the Knicks just trounced yesterday. So the Hawks, I'm gonna call a high D. I've got them a little higher than Orlando for me, and it's mostly the Dyson Daniels factor, just that we have seen him do some damage to Brunson at times this year. Also, I mean, Trae Young, like for what it's worth, I hate the guy, but I hate him because he's been good in the playoffs against the Knicks. Like he clearly relishes the Madison Square Garden floor, all that stuff. They're without Jalen Johnson, which was a huge blow to them, and so that really sucks for them. And obviously they traded DeAndre Hunter partway through the season, who was a big part of of them playing so well against the Knicks earlier this year. But it's mostly that Dyson Daniels factor. Again, I think the maximum that would happen, again, if they make up a 5-game deficit and overtake Detroit or whomever for that 6th seed, that's first off, that's the unlikely thing there. But then, if they're able to do that, it would just be like, I give them a chance to take like 2 games off the Knicks and maybe scare you for a potential 3rd game. But that's it. I don't really think they would actually win, but I do think that with how good of a defender Dyson Daniels is, that would just be a back and forth for the whole series between him and Brunson, unless someone else stepped up in Brunson's stead and, won them games otherwise. But yeah, that's probably my rationale there.
Yeah, I'm with you. The idea of Trae Young staring down Karl Anthony Towns in pick and roll is incredibly scary. Like, what did Trae get? Like, it was like 29 points and like 17, 18 assists last time the 2 teams played. And that was with Mikal. I remember the first half of that game, we were saying like, wow, he played great defense on Trae. I do like the adjustment the Knicks made in overtime, which was letting Cat switch. And if you remember, Cat got like 3 stops in a row in OT, like deflected a ball, one time just shut Trae down and made him take a little fadeaway. Had one more play, maybe he deflected a lob or something. I can't quite remember, but the Knicks do have that in their back pocket. And I think Cat has proven to be pretty effective doing that. Again, it's another series where I would lean pretty heavily into the double big. So you have Mitch more often than not defending that pick and roll instead of Trae, because I think Trae is just too good. And whatever coverage you play, if it's Cat up there, he's going to find a way to torture him. The wings are just really young. Like, I don't trust Dyson Daniels. On offense in the playoffs, Ricochet has been amazing. He's been much better than I thought he was going to be. I don't really trust him in a round one series against the Knicks. I just think it's too much youth, not enough scoring post DeAndre Hunter, even if LeVert's been solid. Like, they don't really super scare me. I would have Orlando personally as the high D team. I would have Detroit as the low D team. Alex, I think we can safely move on to our 2 F tier teams, unless you're going to surprise me. I would have Chicago and Miami there. Chicago, respect to them in the sense that they've pushed the Knicks to their limits twice this year, if I remember correctly, maybe even a third time. They play really well. They get up to play the Knicks. Josh Giddey, he can make threes against the Knicks all of a sudden. There's just not enough talent on that team, like, and they don't even want to make the playoffs. So it'd be pretty sad if a team with championship aspirations struggled with them. And Miami, we saw what the Knicks did to Miami without Brunson yesterday. I have immense respect for Eric Spoelstra and that staff. I have immense respect for Bam Adebayo's ability to injure a couple of the Knicks' key players and maybe get into the series that way. But aside from that, I think they are a crappy team at this point. They've now lost, I believe, 7 in a row, and before that had lost like 2 out of 4 or something. Like, they are lost without Jimmy Butler, and I don't really see any way they fix that.
Fun fact, they're at 8 in a row that they've lost.
That is fun. That makes me happy. I'm going to sleep better tonight knowing that. Yeah.
It's great. I love reveling in their success. Also, if I may throw another pot shot, may I just say the amount of joy it brings me that the Sixers are nowhere to be found on this list, and are in fact so far out of the picture that they're not even worth discussing on a playoff podcast. Maybe Paul George can discuss the playoffs on his podcast though once he resumes at the end of the season. Anyway,
you know what he should talk about? He should talk about Quentin Grimes in 20 games, putting together 5 better performances than he's had all year as a Sixer. That's what he should talk about.
Yeah, I think that would probably be pretty good. People might pay.
I would listen to that episode. I bet a lot of our audience would listen to that episode.
Yeah, he could start the Patreon just for that episode alone.
There you go.
You know, he could stop making it free and just go right to paywall, just with that one alone. Anyway, yeah, F tier for both those teams. They don't scare me in the playoffs. You know, I think. First off, the Bulls, I think, are just going to actively try to not do it just to get themselves in the lottery. They're going to throw the play-in game if they end up in it. At least if they're smart, they should. I don't know why you wouldn't. And then the Heat, you know, again, they would have to put it together enough to beat both the Hawks and the Magic, most likely, or one of those two. I mean to say, you know, whoever loses that first matchup, and I don't think they even have the juice to do that. But if they make it, yeah, they're a shell of themselves. The only thing that would you know, and again, they would have to not only make it, but then make it to the next round to face the Knicks too, I guess, because I think they're probably more or less mathematically eliminated from the 6th seed at this point.
Yeah, we're cheating the premise a little bit by making fun of those teams, but
they'd have to make up 8.5 games to get the 6th seed at this point. So yeah, it's just fun to dunk on them. They suck, and you know, that wasn't always the case. So. Good times as Knicks fans to be able to throw a couple pot shots here and there. Anyway, I think that is all we got to talk about for today, but we got plenty of great stuff coming to you guys, including back-to-back game recaps to end the week. So we'll have those for you guys, and then plenty of great stuff going forward, which we don't know what we're doing yet, but we'll figure it out when we get there. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.